Okay, we're going to go over, there's three concepts that we need to go over that will be on the final exam. Things that we have mentioned during the school year but really haven't practiced. And so I want to make sure to touch base so you have these on your notes. So the first thing is when tracing code and there are no curly braces following, let's say, an if statement, an else if, else, while, or for statement, then there's an important thing to understand. So if you look down here, you notice that we have an if statement, and then there are no curly braces following, and we're used to having the curly braces. So if you look in this example here, you see that here's the if statement, and then you have just one if clause, and then you have your two curly braces here, the beginning and ending curly brace for the if clause. So what's going to happen though is you could actually write this code here, these two you could write without the curly braces because there's only one line in here. The else here would need curly braces because there's two lines inside of those. And so here's the key thought. If no curly braces are used for one of these types of statements, then these statements affect only the next line of code. So if we have an if here, if statement here, then the only line that will be affected is line 3. So technically, if you wanted to write, and one thing to do that you could do is you could do a curly brace here and a curly brace here. If you want to do that type of thing, and because you're used to that, then that would be one way to do it. So if you don't see curly braces, you could add curly braces, but you only add it to the next line down, not more than one, because if there are no curly braces, it means only the next line is going to be an F clause. So the other thing to keep in mind is that indentation is for the programmer and has nothing to do with how the code is compiled. So just because there's no indentation on any of these, that won't make any difference. So make sure you understand that the indentation is not critical to the compiler. So if you look at this, since only line 3 is part of the if structure, in other words, only line 3 is the if clause. Since the Boolean expression is false, so we have the if clause, or the if statement, followed by the if clause. And then everything else here is outside of the if structure. And so since the Boolean expression is false, only line 3 is skipped. And so we go on and we actually do the next line. So you actually print goodbye and it prints come back. So try this next example. See if you can figure out what goes in here. And then so pause the video, try it out, and then check back with the video to see if you did it correctly. Okay, so what should have happened here is, since only line 3 is part of the while loop, or only line 3 is part of the while loop, because this after the for statement, since there's no curly braces, only the next line down is part of the for loop. And so, in other words, only line 3 is in the body of the loop. So what's going to happen is it starts out with x being 1, and then it goes through the body of the loop, and it says to print hello. So it's going to print hello to start. And then it's going to come back, because that ends the loop. It's going to go back and increment. So x becomes 2. 2 is less than or equal to 3. Come back and print hello. And then it's going to go and come back to here increment becomes 3, which is still 3 is still less than or equal to 3, so it goes back in the loop, prints hello again. Then x becomes 4 right here, incremented. 4 is not less than or equal to 3, so it kicks out of the loop, which so it goes down to line 4 and then prints goodbye, and then prints come back. Alright, so next practice problem, let's try this. It's going to incorporate a couple of different things. Be careful to read the code carefully because it incorporates some printing issues and the backslash, and by the way, this should be backslash. Oh, that is backslash. That's good. So go ahead and try this problem and then come back to the video. Okay, so here we are. We have x int x, and then x is 1, and then 1 is less than 4, and so we're now going to go into the loop. Now the loop, since there's no curly braces, the loop only includes the next line, one line down. So that is the loop right there. And so we are going to print the value of x, which is 1. Then x is incremented here and becomes 2, and so then we print x again. But here's the thing to recognize, that this is print. So print means that after it's done printing x, the insertion point stays on the same line. So this is going to print the 2 right after it, and then it gets incremented right here, and so x is 3. X3 is less than 4, so in print x again, x again. So it's 3 right here, and then we are going to go here and increment and become 4, and 4 is not less than 4, so now it's false. So now we jump out of, or kick out of the loop and go to the next line down. The next line down here is to print Xavier, but here's the issue. The insertion point is right here after printing x the last time, and so what we have is a \n, which means to press enter now. So we press enter now, then we print Xavier, and then the ln says now go to the next line down. That's the order of events. Alright, the next thing you have is an if statement. The if statement, since there's no curly braces, you're going to have a just one if clause, because there's no curly braces, which are needed if you have more than one. The next thing is that you're going to have is an else clause, and there is no there are no curly braces, so only the next line down is going to work. And so the green part here now is only going to be the else part. So here's the important thing then, is that the let's see, where did it go? That this whole thing right here, this whole thing right here from 5 to 8 is called the if-else structure. So we're in an if-else structure. Well, how many alternatives are there? There's 2, because there's if x is greater than 2, and then there's everything else. 2 alternatives. And how many alternatives does the compiler go through? It's always 1. If there's 7 alternatives, it only does the first one that's true. And so in this case, as we look at this, x is 4, and 4 is greater than 2, so we're going to actually go ahead and do the if clause. That means that we're not going to do the else clause, and so we can tell that we can do a strike through to remind us when we get to the else, don't do it, because we're doing the if clause. You only do one alternative. And so in this case, it prints out x times 4, which is 16. And then we're done with the if-else structure. So we go down to the last statement, which is to print that x is 4. Okay, that's the practice problem.